In all my years of playing Skyrim, there's always been certain scripted events that come to pass without notice or consequence. Sure enough, it might be an interesting novelty to be approached by an NPC on your very first playthrough, to be handed a note specifically designed to make the player feel special or important. As if your actions have consequences powerful enough to make the pixel people stop to take note of your ever-decreasing mediocrity. But what if this wasn't the case? You see, I've always considered the courier's visits to be an inevitability. But one thing I've always wondered, and by wondered I of course mean received this as a viewer suggested challenge a few weeks ago and thought, hey, that sounds like fun. Could you beat the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim without being caught by the courier? So first let's go over the rules for this challenge. Rule 1, rather obviously, I cannot get caught by the courier or talk to him under any circumstances. Rule 2, I cannot kill the courier, be it purposefully or accidental. Rule 3, I will not be changing the difficulty or turning off survival mode at any point. Survival mode disables fast travel, which will make this challenge all the more difficult. Rule 4, I will not be using companions as they make combat far too easy. With the exception of course being scripted events such as travelling with Esbern and Delphine. And rule 5, no glitches, cheats or exploits. Oh, and one last rule, I must start the Dark Brotherhood questline and kill Grella the Kind as soon as I leave Riverwood. Now this is because if memory serves me correctly, this will trigger the courier to deliver a note to you from the Dark Brotherhood. So generally making as much waves as possible is going to be a good thing for this challenge, as it will force the courier to come to us at some point. And not a rule but a personal preference, I'm also going to shout in the towns, as I believe that also triggers a courier note. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the challenge. So to start with, I decided to be a high elf for an increased magicka pool. Ever since the races got nerfed after Oblivion, they all pretty much feel the same, apart from the high elf who actually gets some kind of noticeable bonus. So survival mode cannot be engaged until you leave Helgen, nor is there any courier to speak of. This puts it in the unique position of being the only time in this challenge where you can level up without sleeping in a bed. So because I don't bother with stamina at all and my magicka's where it needs to be, I choose health and choose stealth as my perk because, yes, I'm gonna be one of those guys. So now that I've escaped Helgen, I turn on survival mode and head straight for the Guardian Stones. I choose the Thief Stone for a 20% bonus to my light armor and sneak skill, as they're going to be the main ones that I'll be using. Then I head to Riverwood to offload the junk I collected in Helgen, as well as doing a little bit of farming, and by farming I mean robbing the local populace of all their worldly goods. I'm going to need quite a lot of food for this challenge, and the more I can get for free, the better. There are also some farms around Whiterun that I was able to take from. So, as stipulated in the rules, the first thing I do is take a carriage to Windhelm, where I talk to Aventus Arantino about taking care of Grella the Kind. So this quest is very resemblant of the British classic Oliver Twist. Does anyone remember the scene where Oliver hires an assassin to take out the head of the orphanage? So I'm able to stealth assassinate Grella the Kind. Grella died as she lived, dripping with blood and falling over. And after returning to Aventus, this should now trigger a note from the Dark Brotherhood at some point. And so the hunt begins. I know the courier will be coming for me now, it's only a matter of time. So, proceeding as normal, I head to Dragonreach to talk to Jarl Balgruf about getting the stone from Bleak Falls Barrow. I considered joining the companions so that I would always have a bed to sleep in inside of Whiterun. Deciding to do this later, I headed outside and... Okay, so now I knew the game was really on. Now I knew for a certainty that he'd be after me. So I'd have to reload a previous save and find an alternate route out of Whiterun. I had hoped to do a bit of shopping while I was here, but that would have to wait now. Forget Alduin. I was being pursued by a madman wielding a letter. Survival mode has cut my carrying capacity in half. I don't have any room for junk mail. Confident that I hadn't been followed, I headed into Alvar's house to find a bed so that I could level up. And then this happened. Now this really shocked me because I was sure you would have to receive the letter from the courier before this event. Now there are so many problems with this that I don't know where to begin. so I would have to reload, and unfortunately I wasn't yet able to level up. So now I have 3 options, neither of which I like. Option 1 would be to, of course, initiate myself into the Dark Brotherhood, but in doing so I'm reasonably confident this would cancel the courier trying to deliver his letter to me. Which in fairness is well within the parameters of this challenge, but I'm deliberately trying to make this harder, so that he is always chasing me no matter what. Option 2 is to simply kill Astrid, however this has the same outcome as option 1. If I'm wrong in anything I've just said, please let me know in the comments as I'm not 100% sure. But option 3, the one I did opt for in the end, was to simply reload the save. For now, I wouldn't be able to level up. Which was a huge detriment when I fought the Draugr Overlord. He was seriously difficult to kill and I actually nearly died myself. I did manage to get some pretty cool loot though, which I would be able to disenchant later. As I left Bleak Falls Barrow, I gazed out across the landscape of Skyrim. I knew he was out there now, watching, waiting. And without the comfort of fast travel holding my hand, I was all alone in the frozen wilderness, as I was cut down by some fledgling vampires. My only comfort being that you can't deliver a letter to a dead man. Twice more I fought the blood-sucking parasites until at last I smote my enemy and threw their carcass on the mountainside. Then, just when I thought I'd reached the safety of Whiterun, he returned. I was able to give chase, and leading him in a loop, I managed to make it into Whiterun. Luckily for now, I was faster than him. I knew the problem I might have would be that he would be waiting for me outside of buildings, so I'd have to find a creative way of getting away from him once I was inside of Whiterun. I began pleading with the Jarl as I held the stone of Bleak Falls Barrow in front of him. I didn't care that a dragon had been attacking the western watchtower. I needed to move quickly. I was being pursued by a maniac. To my luck, the courier didn't actually follow me inside of Dragon's Reach. I had to wait an hour for the rest of Whiterun's finest to appear. Luckily, the courier did not. So at level 2 I wasn't going to be able to realistically do much to this dragon, so I decided to sit this one out. I thought I'd grab myself a sandwich while the guards took care of the dragon. Nothing too fancy, just cheese and onion crisps, or I guess that's potato chips for the American viewers. By the time I finished, the dragon still wasn't dead, so I did actually have to go out and help out a little bit. So that fight was a scripted event and therefore it doesn't violate my no companions rule. So I probably could have done more in that fight, but to be totally honest, I was just hungry. So on the way back into Whiterun, the courier showed up again. This time I was able to just run around him. However, I knew this wasn't a good contingency plan. I needed access to the shops and God forbid the stables to buy a horse at some point. I couldn't just keep avoiding the courier like this. Now as it turns out, he doesn't follow you into shops, so I was able to trade with Belethor. So I caught a quick glimpse of the courier running towards me as I headed back up to Dragon's Reach. Did you see him? After speaking to the Jarl, it was time to go up High Hrothgar, but first I was going to need some supplies, specifically food. Unfortunately though, in order to cook most things in Skyrim, you need salt pile. I had an ample supply of food waiting in the Jarl's kitchen, but no salt pile that I could find. So I didn't know this at the time, but I was about to completely screw myself over in this challenge and make things so much more difficult for me. So to begin with, I waited at the steps of Dragon Reach until I could see the courier approaching. Once he was close enough, I headed down the side of the rocks and made my escape from Whiterun. So this is where I kinda messed things up a bit. To start with, I went to the Hunting Brew Meadery to buy some food. Sounded like a good idea, right? Then I realised that I could have probably sold my Valor Stone, which cost 1,000 septims, to one of the merchants in order for me to buy a horse, as I already had 400 septims. But when I went back into Whiterun, I got caught by the courier straight away. So, like I say, I didn't know this at the time, but I just reloaded a previous save from before I bought the food provisions from the meadery. To be honest, the stamina bar showing that my character was still hungry should have been an obvious giveaway, but I didn't notice it at the time. I proceeded to Whiterun to steal a horse, only just narrowly escaping the courier by a mere metre or two. So I was able to make my way to Iverstad with my stolen horse when, in the distance, I saw him yet again. Now, I would have loved to have stopped in Iverstad for a moment and possibly buy some more food. I didn't yet know that I was out of food. But thinking quick on my feet, I galloped out of Iverstad so that the courier would follow me. Then I proceeded to turn round and gallop straight past him so that he wouldn't catch me. After that, I just had to head straight up to High Hrothgar. So the Greybeards taught me the Whirlwind Sprint Shout, which could be quite useful for getting away from the courier actually. And this was also when I initially realised that I didn't have any food due to reloading after the courier caught me in Whiterun. So I decided to steal some of the food from the Greybeards. It would do for now. I then began the long descent down High Hrothgar in the way the developers intended. I somehow managed to end up in Riverwood, which is okay because I needed to sleep and level up anyway. However, when I got approached by some cultists... So I'd have to reload a previous save from when I was still making my way down High Hrothgar and head straight for Whiterun this time. Now, I actually did make it into Whiterun without even spotting the courier, so I don't actually know where he is. I assume he's probably at Riverwood still. And due to the time, Belethor's shop was not open, but that was okay because I had some cultists to deal with. I'd actually returned to Whiterun with the intention of using a shout, which I actually did. You see, I needed to use a shout because it would trigger a courier note. I really did not like the prospect of staying at level 2 forever and knew I was going to have to sleep and start the Dark Brotherhood quest line, and I was a little bit concerned that if I did that, the courier would stop chasing me. And so by shouting in Whiterun, I was pretty much able to guarantee that I would always be pursued by the courier. Then, on my way out of the Drunken Huntsman, well, all I can say is it's a good thing I quick save all the time, as well as Skyrim providing 3 autosaves. So this time I actually went to the Bannered Mare instead of the Drunken Huntsman, and found a bed for the night. I was also able to buy some food. Well, now that I shouted in the town, the courier would still be chasing me, so it was time to deal with Astrid. So unfortunately I forgot to press record when I killed all 3 of the victims, but I got Astrid's key and escaped. I was actually extremely close to, let me try and pronounce this, Oostengrav, but at long last I was able to sleep in the abandoned shack and level up. And oh boy did I. I advanced all the way to level 7, increasing my health attribute every time. So I decided to take Stealth level 2, Backstab, Armsman, Agile Defender, and Muffled Movement. I learned the Become Ethereal shout, which I only mentioned because I might end up using it later. And I collected the love note from Delphine telling me to meet her in Riverwood. I made the long journey back to Whiterun on foot as I still didn't have a horse. I'd actually intended on heading to Marthal, but unfortunately the courier was there waiting for me, so I had to reload and head to Whiterun. Rather surprisingly, there was no sign of the courier yet, so I headed to Belethor's. With enough money together, I was now able to buy a horse. Unfortunately, there's our old friend. Well, with very little choice at the moment, I had to head up to Dragon's Reach, because I knew he wouldn't follow me in there. Once safely within Dragon's Reach, all I had to do was turn around and leave, at which point I could wait at the top of the stairs and try and spot him coming. Can you see him yet? Wait for it. There he is. So, same as before, I headed down the rocks to the left and escaped Whiterun. Rather unfortunately, however, my success would be short-lived, as just as I went to buy a horse, he turned up again. So I had to reload the autosave from when I came out of Whiterun and try it again. This time I was successful and managed to escape. Now, I had actually anticipated that the courier might be waiting at Riverwood, and sure enough. However, I was actually able to successfully navigate around him and enter the Sleeping Giant's Inn, where I talked to Delphine. She gave me a room, although unfortunately not in the attic. I was able to level up, and I picked Overdraw, giving me 20% damage bonus with a bow. Then she mumbled a bunch of nonsense about killing a dragon and, oh look, our friend's back. So I did actually have a few attempts at trying to leave the inn, but every time the courier would catch me, so I would have to reload a save from before I even came to Riverwood. This time I simply galloped past him all the way out of Riverwood, turned round, waited for him to come past, only this time he didn't even bother with me. I think this guy might have been the courier, but he didn't even acknowledge me. Well, wherever he went to anyway, I managed to get back to seeing Delphine. I leveled up just as I'd done before. When I left the inn, the courier was nowhere to be seen, apart from this guy here, who actually I think was the man I passed before. He's definitely not the courier. Or if he was, he didn't speak to me anyway. So my next plan was to take a carriage from Whiterun to Windhelm. And as expected, our old friend popped up again. So I would have to give chase, giving him just enough to keep chasing me. I felt like if I got too far, then he would just stop altogether. Eventually I turned round and headed back to Whiterun. It seemed that he disappeared into thin air, which was good. I never thought something so simple as getting a carriage to Windhelm could be so much work. So, once I had arrived in Windhelm, I made sure that he was not around me before I proceeded to Kynesgrove. So, on my way to Kynesgrove, I passed Delphine, which told me I was going the wrong way and that I needed to be following her. However, as I did, the courier showed his face again. So, I galloped as fast as I could towards the local inn. I got caught by the innkeeper who was telling me not to go up to Kynesgrove, and due to this... So on my next attempt, I didn't see the courier or Delphine and headed straight for the inn to warm up as my character was freezing. But on my way out of the inn, I bumped into Delphine and... So by now this challenge was starting to wear away the last remnants of my sanity. So after reloading the autosave, I simply just made a run for it. Luckily, he did not follow me into Kynesgrove, and I was able to take down the dragon, stealing its soul, which I will probably use for the ethereal shout. Then, as I made my way back to my horse, I spotted our old friend again. You know, it's getting to the stage where I might need a restraining order. Anyway, I just about made it to my horse and headed for Windhelm. I had to catch a carriage. As I got on the carriage, I could see the courier in the background. I got so close to getting caught this time. Once back in Whiterun, I didn't see the courier again until I was in Riverwood. I simply galloped out of the town, turned round and came back the way I came, before heading to the Sleeping Giant's Inn. I bought some provisions, rested for the night, and Delphine told me that I needed to go to Solitude to meet Malborn the Mule. Now, obviously I would have to get the carriage from Whiterun. As I approached, I saw the courier, and then something strange happened. He straight up vanished into thin air. So here comes the courier, and I'm just going to freeze it for a second. I believe this is the exact frame before he disappeared. And then he's just gone. Now, I considered reloading because this has to be a glitch, right? But then I noticed him right here, so I give him a run round and jumped in the carriage. Now it's probably worth mentioning that I lost the courier altogether this time. I think the same thing happened again where he disappeared. I think this might actually be some kind of game mechanic to save memory, but I'm not sure. I met with Malborn the Mule and told him to shove my equipment up his arse. I assume that's where he's keeping it. Then when I headed back into Solitude, oh my god guys, he's actually not here. The courier is not in. Oh wait, there he is. I'd hoped to do a little bit of shopping in Solitude, but never mind. I was convinced that the courier would show his face while I was preparing for the party, but he actually didn't show up. And to be honest, the Thalmor Embassy doesn't have anything to do with the courier. He's just not here at all. I found the information that I would need and hightailed it out of there straight back to Riverwood. Well, I couldn't exactly go straight back to Riverwood. See, it would be much easier to get a carriage to Whiterun first, and unfortunately, the courier was waiting for me. So actually getting onto the cart was a very complicated process. First, I had to jump on my horse, and then lure the courier to the bridge just outside of Solitude, and wait for him to chase me. But he played his disappearing act again. I don't know where he went, but I was able to get on the cart. Getting back to Riverwood, I galloped straight past the courier and into the inn. I slept for a few hours where I leveled up and chose Novice Restoration. After speaking to Delphine, she told me to go and find Esbern, as I left the inn. So luckily I was able to just load the autosave and run like hell. I had to lead the courier on a chase over the bridge before I swooped back round and jumped on my horse and made my escape. With no sighting of the courier whatsoever, I managed to make it to Bellathor's to sell all of the elven gear that I'd acquired in the Thalmor embassy. On the way out of the shop, I saw the courier again, but I was so done with this guy. No more tricks, I just run straight past him and escape. Then I managed to catch a carriage to Riften, where I had to go speak to Brynjolf. Now, don't get me wrong, it would have been nice to join the Thieves Guild, however, there was no way that I would be able to talk to Brynjolf without the courier catching me. So I was actually able to start this quest by talking to Brynjolf indoors, at which point I got caught by Madesi. You will fail the quest, but Brynjolf will still want to talk to you. I didn't realise you don't actually have to do any of this and you can head straight to the Ratway. So that's just what I did. A few dead Thalmor soldiers and an Esbern later, and I was able to escape Riften and get on the carriage. However, at this point my game froze, so I had to reload and do this again. So the second time I did this, I managed to get on the carriage and he caught me just before the load screen. So on attempt number 3, I was actually able to catch the carriage and I headed straight for Riverwood. So, while Delphine and Esbern talked, I slept for the night and leveled up. There was actually no sign of the courier in or out of Riverwood this time, which was pretty lucky. Well, that is of course until I got to Whiterun. See, I would have to take a carriage to Markarth. Everything seemed to be going pretty well until I got on the carriage. The courier caught me just before the screen went blank. Now, even though I did escape him as there was no conversation, he had caught me, so I would have to reload and catch the carriage again. This time I was successful. So I was able to make it to Markarth and Skyhaven Temple without seeing the courier at all. We reached Alduin's Wall without incident. Now, due to the proximity of the Forsworn camp to Skyhaven Temple, my horse kind of just ran away and got lost somewhere, so I did have to run back. So then the Greybeards taught me the Clear Sky shout. I went up to see Parthenax, who told me I would need to find an Elder Scroll to learn Dragonrend. So after running down High Hrothgar, taking a carriage from Whiterun to Winterhold, a dragon showed up as I tried to enter the College of Winterhold. So we had to fight it first. Now, due to the freezing temperatures, my character was starting to become very, very cold. Things got blurry and I was losing quite a lot of health when the dragon died. By the time I got back to Feralda to try and enter the College of Winterhold, I was so close to death that I actually had to break in to somebody's house to get out of the cold, as I wouldn't be able to reach the inn in time. Having warmed up just enough to keep going, he caught me again. Now, to be fair, I assumed this was down to being too cold, or maybe he was just in the right place at the wrong time, so I decided to wait a while longer, and sure enough, this time I was able to run straight to the College of Winterhold. So my next job was to find Septimus to find information on an Elder Scroll. It wasn't too difficult, although I did have to stand in this exact spot for a while to warm up. And there was absolutely no sighting of the courier whatsoever on my way to and collecting the Elder Scroll. So my next task was to get to the Time Wound. However, first I wanted to stop in Whiterun to get some supplies. I had 2 attempts at getting to Whiterun, getting caught by the courier both times. On the 3rd attempt, I managed to make it to Cicero, where I proceeded to steal his horse and head to Whiterun. So I narrowly avoided the courier on the way into Whiterun. Then I went to make some hot vegetable soup and venison stew, because I was going to need this for the Alduin fight. Then, sure enough, he popped up yet again. So after reloading and outrunning him, I eventually made it up High Hrothgar to the Time Wound and the Alduin fight began. After slaying Alduin, my next job was to broker a peace between the Stormcloaks and the Imperials. I very narrowly avoided the courier on the way into Whiterun to talk to Jarl Balgruuf. Man, this guy just will not leave me alone. So I actually had little to no trouble when I had to go and talk to General Tullius and Ulfric Stormcloak to get them to agree to a peace treaty. Oh wait, scratch that. He was an absolute pain in Windhelm. See, I actually got stuck in the Temple of Talos because he kept catching me on the way out, so I actually had to attack one of the priests, at which point I got sent to jail just to get away from him. Eventually we get round to the peace negotiations. I sided with the Empire, and to my surprise the Courier actually showed up when I called Uldoving. So in order to shake him off I had to head back inside of Dragon's Reach. Now, I don't think the Courier's actually meant to enter this building, and he completely ignored me. He was even chasing me while I was trying to free Uldovig so he could take me to Skuldorfen. I don't think I can stress enough how much of a pain this guy actually is to deal with. So then I reload. This time I actually managed to free Uldovig, and as we're flying to Skuldorfen, can anyone else see the problem here? Don't worry though, eventually I was able to actually get on Uldovig and fly to Skuldorfen. And that is it for our encounters with the Courier. He will not appear in Skuldorfen nor Sovngarde, although that would have been really cool. All that was left to do really was just kill Alduin, which we successfully did, and beat the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim without getting caught by the Courier. So I just want to thank you all so much for watching today. I really appreciate the suggestion for this challenge. I've had a lot of fun with it. Please like, subscribe and all that good stuff. Leave it in comments if you do have any, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.